I'm glad you guys are here for this, because you know what I'm going to do with these? I've had enough. I've had enough of it. Hey guys, welcome back to the JPM Performance channel. Today we are going to talk about, by viewer suggestion, today we are going to talk about Aeroquip hoses, the different styles, the different fittings, why I use what I use, and then we'll assemble one so I can show you the way I do it. Before we get started, as you can see today, I'm wearing my JPM hoodie, and you can buy these on the channel right below here. It's winter time. They're very comfortable. I like them. Get yours today. Okay. You can see I've got my reading glasses. This is the old man so he can see up close glasses. I've also got my safety glasses in my pocket here for when we cut our hose for a couple different things. So what I've got laid out here are basically the three types of Aeroquip hoses that you can use. These are all 6AN lines, which is what I use for fuel line. So we'll start kind of down here at the end. So you can see that this is a, it's a rubber lined hose, but it has a cloth outside. To me, the only reason to use this is for weight, right? So this is a stainless braided rubber line as well, but it's got a little more weight to it. The reason that I don't use this stuff is because it can cut much easier. You're not cutting through this braided line. Now, I'm a big advocate of making sure that wherever you run your lines, that you secure them, you can tie them off so that they're not going to rub anything. There's also been, you can also buy the heat wrapping. It's actually this orange heat shielding, and you can slip it over your line. The reason that I only use that close to extremely hot components like exhaust systems and things like that is because if you have a little bit of an issue with your line, like it's leaking, you can't see it with that wrapping around it, although it's very good for around heat. So that's great, but I personally would not wrap it on lines going through a car or under a car. I think it's more important to just fasten them properly. So anyway, this is assembled the same way that this is assembled. I just don't use it because it's too easy to get cut, break, melt, whatever. So I don't use it. The other option that you have, this is what's called push lock. So what we have is we have essentially a barbed fitting, and what you do is you can heat this hose up. You can see this is a pretty old piece, but you can heat this hose up and you can just push it on to it like that. Now this is a little bit smaller than this, but you have to mount this in your vise, heat your hose up and push it on. Sometimes, now and then, I will use this for fuel line under the hood a little bit, not a lot. I've seen these actually slip off. I've seen them fail right at the barb. It's not my preference. Here's my preference. Aeroquip braided external line with a rubber interior. Very resilient, very strong. The only real downfall that these have is as they age, the braiding will come apart a little bit, and for those of you that have messed with braided lines, you know that that can hurt. I mean, you can get cut and poked a little bit with these braided lines, but when they're brand new like this, they're just beautiful. And honestly, you should probably replace these, you know, every 5 or 6 years anyway, just because it's a rubber inside and we're using this fuel that is probably not the best for it. So I probably would suggest that you replace them every 5 or 6 years anyway. And that way you won't have to deal with old line. Now this is 6AN line, but what I'm going to show you today is the same with 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 20, whatever you're using for oil, fuel, whatever. It's all the same process. So you can see I've got this one installed already, and then I've got a bunch of lines. So this is the fuel line that I'm getting ready to put into the H Production Mazda 2, and we're going to start with cutting braided line. Okay. My preference is to wrap it with duct tape. Doesn't have to be yellow. The only reason I'm using yellow is because I don't like yellow, and so I'm just burning it up, right? So I'm using yellow. So to me, there's two ways of doing it. You guys have probably seen these cutters. I can't honestly tell you where I got these. I think I got them from Summit Racing. They work okay. Not necessarily my preference, but I'm going to kind of show you how they work. So when you've got your line wrapped really good like this, you know you've got your distance where you want it. You'll just simply give it a cut like that. Now, generally, in my experience, this is what happens. It smashes it in about, I don't know, these things aren't even that old, but in about 10 or 20 cuts, I think these have just gone dull. And I mean, you can just, I mean, it's going to come loose eventually, I think. I'm glad you guys are here for this, because you know what I'm going to do with these? I've had enough. I've had enough of it. So I've got this really nasty looking, pinched off. Now I'm going to give you guys a quick little disclaimer. It's possible that with a really high quality pair of those, maybe it cuts better, but even from the manufacturers where I've gotten certain lengths and they've cut them, it crimps it like this. And I don't like that. So I'm going to show you my preferred method. So this is my next fuel line for the Mazda 2. I have marked the center of where I want to cut. Now, how did I figure that out? When you open up these fittings and you look down inside, you're going to see that the hose is going to come into right into the bottom of the threads. So if you look down inside of your fitting and you see where the threads end, they generally end right where the chamfer ends on the outside. So when I'm measuring like this, I want this hose to be within literally about 1/8 of an inch of perfect when it's completely assembled. So I put this fitting on the end where it's going. I installed this onto the fuel cell, and I found that I wanted this right here. This is the perfect length. So let's go this direction. After trying a few different things over the years, before I came up with this method, what I would do is I would clamp into the vise and I would use a cutoff wheel. Cutoff wheel worked pretty good, but it didn't cut fast enough to give me the cleanest cut that I could possibly get. So here's what I do now. A chop saw. You're going to want to come around this side. So center up your cut. Roll that into position. Put on your safety glasses. So I will hold this straight. You can see how this has a tendency to wobble. And the thing to do is to just kind of go for it. You're always going to get a little bit of fraying along the outside, but you can see how straight that cut is. I honestly wish there was something that was a little bit better than this, but this is kind of the best thing I've seen. You can't use any sort of a saw with teeth because it'll just grab. So the chop saw works pretty good in my opinion. So now we're going to come over to our vise and we're going to install this fitting. So the first thing you want to do, and this is where I'm going to put on my reading glasses so I can see up close. You want aluminum jaws in your vise. That way you don't damage the anodizing on your fitting. And these also come with a nice 45-degree groove. You can see these are pretty well used. But because of that, you can line up your flats on your fitting just perfectly like that. So I'll just snug it up into the vise like that. Now I'm going to remove the tape from the hose that we just cut. So what the tape does is it insulates the hose and it tries to keep it from fraying. You're always going to get a little bit of fraying, but I've got a method for getting that fray to work out okay. So get all that duct tape off. Okay, now I'm using it's just Slick 50. You can use WD-40, any sort of a penetrating oil. I'll spray it down inside of the fitting like this. I'll spray the outside of the hose. And then I've got a tiny little flat blade screwdriver here. And you'll stick the bottom of the hose in and you'll rotate the hose into the fitting. The fraying just has to be pressed in a little at a time. Work your way around till you've got all of that in there, and then I'll rotate it counterclockwise generally. I suppose you could go the other way. Maybe it's because I'm right-handed, I rotate it right counterclockwise. You'll rotate it while you're pushing in, and you'll kind of feel it stop. And when it's stopped, what that means is that that hose is right up to the bottom of those threads. And that's where you want to be able to look down in and see that we don't have any fraying impeding, and there's not. We've just got a hose. So, next step, and a couple of things here. I'm going to turn this straight up, but I'm also going to keep my fitting flush with the top of the aluminum jaws. The reason that I do that is because when you're tightening down your fitting, like this, when you're snugging it down, you'll have a tendency for your wrench to slip down, and what that can do is that can really mar up the top of your fitting right here. So I put it down flush. A little bit more lube on the threads and down inside the hose and on the fitting here. You really can't overdo this. It's a little sloppy, but we're going to clean this hose anyway. I'm going to show you how we do that. Now, when I was first learning how to do these, I'm sure it was my dad, he used to tell me, wrap electrical tape along the bottom of your hose here so that when you tighten your fitting down, you know that the hose is staying in there. Well, after you've done about a few thousand of these, what you learn is that what I'll do is I'll get down on one knee like this, and I'll get my elbow right here at the bottom of the vise, and I'm going to hold this hose. Now, I can feel the depth of this hose pretty easily with just my fingers. But as soon as this starts to snug up like that, I'll grab my wrench, and I've got my depth right here. I've got my hand right along the bottom side of the vise. I will know if this fitting is pushing the hose out. And as I go down, I'm feeling for any movement down there, and it's not. But the fitting is going to get tighter and tighter as you get down to the bottom. So you can see how easily it would be to mar the red section of this fitting. Keep going. Generally, you can get all the way down to the bottom of the red ferrule there. Sometimes you can't quite get it all the way down, which means that you have compressed that hose inside enough. Generally on these 6AN ones, I can get these to tighten up pretty good. So I know that this hose has not slipped out. We have run that all the way down into the fitting. I always buy the ones that swivel. They actually do make these that are fixed. The problem is when you get into the car, especially if you've got like this one, a 45 and a 90, you want to be able to clock this ever so slightly. If I've got my 90 here and my 45 needs to be perfect. So I always get the swivel fittings. So that is a beautiful hose. Now, there's obviously some junk down inside of this hose, right? Let me show you how I clean these out. Over to the solvent tank. I suppose you could use brake clean if you don't have a solvent tank. I like to use solvent, and what I'll do is I will run through in both directions. Sometimes you'll see, there it is right there. You'll see a little bit of junk come out of your hose, but I'll run through this way, and then I'll run through this way, and that is a really clean hose. However, I'm not quite done. What I like to do is, using my hot water hose, I will spray this thing completely out. Inside and out. Now, I don't know, but I'm betting some of you think that running water through your hose is a bad idea. I've been doing it like this for like 25 years. I've never had a fitting fail, and I've never had any debris in any of my lines. So, after you rinse it out with water, solvent and then water, I will spray it off a bunch. And that is the way we do things around here. To me, that is the best, absolute best way that you can use Aeroquip fittings and hoses. That's how I do it. Hope this video has helped you guys. I appreciate you watching. I'm sure there's going to be some great comments. I appreciate it. Bring it on. Thank you much. You guys have a great rest of your day. Take care.